Jazzpunk's very nature is defined by its title. Jazz and punk are arguably two of the most eclectic and abrasive music genres that also retain a sense of rhythm and style, and Jazzpunk is just a straight-up batshit insane game. Developed by all the drug-fueled people at Necrophone Games, Jazzpunk takes the first-person experience game made so popular among a certain crowd of players and turns it into an alternate history psychedelic comedy romp. And that makes me really happy. Now, I should maybe retract on a previous statement. I have no idea if any single person who worked on this game has ever touched any kind of hallucinogenic drug. I do know for a fact, however, that Jazzpunk is just weird, in a very good way. First of all, the game is quite stylized. The cutout look of the characters and creatures, the prominence of objective and dialogue text on the screen, the bright colors and 80s aesthetics, and the soundtrack all contribute to this offbeat sense of humor and design that fundamentally cement Jazzpunk's comedic roots. The monotone and gruff delivery of nearly all the voice acting is a little off-putting at first, even comically, but eventually the charm seeps into your perception and the jokes start to land, and it's glorious. This all kind of reminds me of Blendo Games' 30 Flights of Loving and the absolute strangeness of it all, but comparing the two games do both an extreme disservice. And somehow, Jazzpunk's narrative makes more sense. Following Polyblank, a secret agent, I guess, you go on missions to, I don't know, combat the Soviet Union and its agents in a strange alternate history version of the Cold War. I think you do some weird stuff in this game. From stealing a cowboy's kidney to just, well, taking a vacation, it's clear that Jazzpunk wasn't made for you to relate and feel serious human emotions like with a Gone Home or even a 30 Flights of Loving. Interestingly, Jazzpunk is even a bit more gamey than other so-called experience games, albeit in a mostly borrowed form. Side missions, optional content, and things are peppered throughout the fairly short game. You can beat it in like 2 or 3 hours, but they don't result in any kind of power-ups or genuine in-game rewards, beyond the novelty of some funny gags. Numerous adapted minigames, for lack of a better term, can be found throughout the game's levels, presented through a pun-filled parody filter. Frogger, Space Invaders, Wave Race 64, Fruit Ninja, and Quake, in the form of the wonderfully named Wedding Quake, are all playable in Jazzpunk, in their relatively limited parody form, of course. Still, they all help as fun diversions from the main progression of the game, and while the means of completing objectives is generally boiled down to walking to them, goals aren't necessarily accomplished by doing so. In that, Jazzpunk's design is a little more, well, fun, and helps separate it from the in vogue dramas especially populating the indie PC scene. Of course, there's something else that sets Jazzpunk apart, and it's already been touched on. Its complete and utter strangeness. That and its genuinely funny jokes, references, in-jokes, slapstick, dialogue, situations, and charming style. Everything you interact with yields some kind of humor or visually strange spectacle, and the insane amount of references somehow does nothing to detract from Jazzpunk's own creative identity. As an experience game, that'll be the last time I say it, what I can tell you about it is severely limited as compared to what you can gain from actually playing it. And I think that just applies to all forms of entertainment. In any event, Jazzpunk is hard to explain, and that's part of its appeal and quality. Sure, it has some pretty floaty physics, and a couple of jokes don't necessarily land, and all of them potentially won't if you're not inclined to enjoy the kind of humor it has to offer. One of the first gags involves your character sitting on a whoopee cushion, so that's what you're getting into with Jazzpunk. A unique challenge to the traditional definition of games that maintains a fun level of interactivity and makes you laugh and marvel at the same time. And to adapt the hands-down best line in the game, as uttered by a random henchman in the second level, end of review video game joke.
Put that away. Max Starstoff, man.